Hi, my name's Jenevieve, and I'm here to talk about preparing for your postnatal time, especially during times of challenges. Welcome. Some of you I might know, some of you I might not have ever met before, so I want to just congratulate you and welcome you to help think about preparing for your postpartum time. I have been a birth doula for over 20 years and a psychotherapist specializing in perinatal mental health. And specifically, birth trauma is one of my specialties, and working with a trauma-informed lens. I represent a rich community of psychotherapists that really want to hold you and support you all. So I'm trying to bring in the wisdom of this really rich, diverse community of mental health support therapists that I've learned from and supported, as well as all of the hundreds and hundreds of families that I've had the pleasure and honor of working with. All of their rich experiences are informing this presentation that I want to share with you is wisdom that's hard earned from other families and parents, personal, professional, information from kind of all over. So I'm going to try to present as much as I can to help you feel as confident going into preparing for your postpartum time. So we'll start with pregnancy and what you can do, and sort of then starting planning for postpartum. Sometimes we call it postnatal, sometimes postpartum. A lot of times folks talk about postpartum as postpartum, short for postpartum depression, but it doesn't. Postpartum literally means the time after having a baby. So I might switch back and forth between postpartum or postnatal, meaning the period of time after birth. And I want to also, if there are things that don't fit for you, just feel free to adapt. I'm trying to give information for everybody that will be as universal as possible, but every situation is really unique. So just taking a moment, even as you're thinking about this topic or this time, acknowledge, where are you right now? What do you notice in your body as you're thinking about this? What's been unexpected for you so far? When the COVID pandemic started, a lot of folks were pregnant during that time and had no idea what they were getting into. And now a lot of us do know a lot more about what's going on or what to expect, but there's still all these unknown components. And so that this class started from that perspective of there's so much going on, that what we are all going through can be more intense. And so there's this increased time of challenges. And even though we have more awareness of the ups and downs that might be happening, there's also ups and downs in our own personal lives, professional lives. So we're also going through our own journeys individually, as well as a collective, as a society. So some just beginning acknowledgement that we're all going through things, some expected, some unexpected. And we think about there's a list of what increases our risk for a postpartum mental health or mood anxiety disorder. And so I think really starting with that, I have a sheet that I can reference. There's this Postpartum Progress has put together a checklist, and I really appreciate this checklist, and you'll have access to it later. But the thing I want to focus on are, what are some of the risk factors that can contribute to perinatal mental health? And you'll see words like mom or maternal, but I try to use more generalized terms to be as inclusive as possible. So for maternal mental health, these are some of the things that can increase the risk or recognized risk factors. So you can just sort of sift through, see which some of those might apply to you. And we all have or are going through some kind of stressful event and or trauma, depending on how it's been impacting you in the last year. So we all have one extra checkbox just living during this time of the pandemic in particular, as well as those working with racism and all that comes with that as well. So there's an extra checklist in this risk factor that can be really relevant for a lot of us going through pregnancy and postpartum. So when we talk also about the risk factors, just acknowledging what's there. It doesn't mean there's something bad. It just, if we have a bit more of a risk factor, how do we work with that intentionally? So one of the other, and I'm going to keep going back and forth between this slide presentation and my face so you can get all of the intimacies of being online with this class. But I want to talk about the window of tolerance and what that means and what it looks like. So this is the overview. I'll go through it with a little bit more detail, but basically we have a window of tolerance and we can pop outside of that either above with hyperarousal or below with hypoarousal. So inside that window of tolerance, this is where you feel like things are okay, that life might throw you some punches, but you're calm and alert, but not anxious. So this will shrink. Even just sometimes with pregnancy, it's harder to stay focused. You can be thrown off balance more. And that for some people can be more hormonal. For some folks, it's the big change in maybe the first baby or a consecutive pregnancy. How are we going to add another human to this household or this family? So there's lots of things that that stress can bring it down. And then when we add in any trauma pieces, that for sure will start to narrow that window of tolerance. And as it says over here, that working with a practitioner can help you to enlarge that window of tolerance. But maybe in my window of tolerance, I've run out of decaf. And so I don't have that available. I might have feelings about it, not good or bad. But as we notice that my feelings, if they're fitting inside that window of tolerance, it's, really workable. A lot of us will pop outside of this window of tolerance for a lot of different reasons. That early dysregulation, where maybe you're feeling agitated or anxious, sort of revved up, a little frustrated, not totally out of control, but not comfortable. If that keeps happening, we can pop up into this hyperarousal. That's what most people know as fight or flight. Feelings can overwhelm us and feel like it's hard to down-regulate or re-regulate. Hyperarousal isn't in and of itself a bad thing. If I'm seeing a bike coming at me and I respond from my hyperarousal, I'm able to get out of the way and feel safe and stay safe. If I'm, thinking through, well, maybe it's 3 o'clock and they're trying to get to the post office, right there, then all of a sudden, I'm not able to respond as quickly. So there's some good things about hyperarousal, but when it's overused, it can be really painful. And then if we pop down to that hypoarousal in that, again, early stages of dysregulation, that sort of spacey, losing track of time, sluggish, again, not out of control, but not comfortable. If we keep sort of moving down into that zone, it's numbing out, sort of just feeling either frozen or like you can't make a choice about something. And then the body just takes over. This is another same window of tolerance, but that, just sort of looking at it with different words, different images, but I think that can be really helpful to think about. When we add in distress, that window of tolerance is going to be smaller. So adding in a new human into our household will bring that window down a little bit. It's usually when we encourage folks to decrease media consumption or decrease trying to keep up with things in the same way that they have been, it's because that window is small and we just can't take in as much information. So allowing for your nervous system. And I want to be really clear, these are nervous system responses. They're not just bad thinking. So how do we really support our nervous system when there's a lot going on? If there's a really difficult or traumatic situation, that window gets really small, and there's lots of things we can do to help kind of move that up. But I want to give you that model to think about so you can talk about with your family, your partner, like, my window's really small today, I can't tolerate, or I can't quite get to that one, or I have a lot of resilience and I can really kind of work on doing a few more extra things today, or I can do this part because there's a little bit more stretch in that. So using that to be able to check in with yourself. So talking somewhat about the risk factors and the window of tolerance, I also want to make sure we talk about protective factors. So things that can really help protect us, even if we do have risk factors, right? Who are our community of support? What are our relationships like? How is taking care of myself? So we'll get into more of these components or pieces. Two questions that I get asked a lot, especially since the pandemic started, and thinking about, and this would happen even outside of the time of COVID, people asking, like, what's the risk of flu season with my baby? There's a lot of, if I have fear or if I'm worried about a hailstorm that came through, how will that impact my baby, my pregnancy? So I want to talk about the first part, resilience versus toxic stress. So a lot of us know toxic stress is not helpful or healthy for babies in utero, outside of us. It's not actually healthy or good for any of us. It can really break down our bodies, our functioning. Toxic stress is very different than day-to-day stress. So toxic stress is something that doesn't let up or relieve. And a lot of us are feeling that, can be feeling that. Sometimes that comes in the form of poverty. Sometimes it comes in the form of abuse or racism. Sometimes it comes in the form of a pandemic that seems like it's not ending. So the toxic stress can build up. And what we also know is stress isn't by itself a bad thing, but when we don't have an outlet, it can, that's when the breakdowns can happen. When we bring in resilience, then when we balance that out, all that means is that there's a sharing of that stress, that you're not alone in it, that there's an adult who can be kind of in charge or helping to take care of that. There's permission for feelings. So when we can strengthen our skills, our tools, our relationships, it can translate and transmute the toxic stress into resilience and help actually build a stronger foundation. So what that might look like, if you're feeling a lot of feelings that feel a bit overwhelming, to even just place your hands on your belly or your baby or your womb and just taking a breath or two and letting baby know, you're okay, you're safe. I'm having a hard time with this. Mom, is how I referenced by my kiddo, is having some big feelings. I'm going to work on them. I know who can support me and who can help me. Or I don't know, but I'm going to find that help and support. So really taking that action or accountability to hold space for myself to have the big feelings. I'm really angry about this thing, but I'm going to feel angry and I'll be back. Right. And then giving ourselves permission. So especially as a psychotherapist who works with pregnant folks, when they come in, and if folks are worried, like, is it okay that I have these big feelings? It's absolutely happy or healthy, and creates a lot of resilience when you can feel the feelings, let them move through, acknowledge them, and get the support. Because babies, they're not going to know the content or the exact words, but as you're sharing that with your baby, they'll get that nervous system of like, yes, there's a feeling, and yes, it's manageable. Even if it's really big, right? Mr. Rogers says anything that's worth mentioning is manageable, and feelings are manageable when we mention them. So really coming from that place of strengthening connections, tools, and relationships can move things from survival mode to thriving. And the research around kids in poverty or pregnancies in poverty, for example, when there's a famine, let's say, those babies will create what they need in their nervous system and in their bodies to be able to be resilient in that. They're already doing it. So when we can take that, we're not in those places, but also kind of find those places, those moments of resilience that we can find, whether those are food banks and community support, whatever that might be, to really support the family in these moments, that's going to help reconnect that feeling of it's hard, but we can do hard things. It's difficult and I'm safe and okay. So that's a really important piece of a protective factor. The other part that I love to impart with new parents is making sure you know about the good enough parent. I think a lot of us want to just do everything right and perfect for our babies. And the research, this is from a theory from a long time ago, and it's actually gotten more and more clear with time, that the initial thought, if we do 80% of our best, then 20% of the time we mess up. As long as there's a rupture and repair, or there's a repair with that rupture, that's what's going to help create healthy humans, right? When our little ones grow into adults, that's actually really healthy. It's not possible to be 100% great parent, but let's pretend it is. If we do everything perfect for our kids, and this means even in utero, they won't have the tools they need in the world. So we want them, we don't try to mess up, it just will happen. And the research I love even more is now shifting to 75% we do our best, 25% we mess up, we acknowledge, we come back. So even if it's like, doing something or worrying about something, I want to give you that permission that we're all going to mess up. And that good enough parenting is actually what creates healthy humans that have good resilience, that have that grit, the ability to sort of navigate hard things. So it develops good coping strategies, good skills and strategies. But again, that 25% when we mess up, that it's connected with repair. And so even if that is like I fly off the handle, that as long as I come back and say, I'm really sorry, I totally lost my cool and, was not the grown-up I wanted to be, let's work through that. So I'm hoping that's making sense. So let's move into and talking and thinking through resources and support for your postnatal planning. Now that we've got some ideas about risk factors and protective factors, wanting to give you that information about, I'm just going to pull up this worksheet, some things that you can do to really prepare yourself for the postpartum time. So let me share my screen again. And this actually is a worksheet that I'll send out. There's a whole lot of information. I think it's like an 8-page worksheet that I've put together over the years and updated. That the postnatal quadrant worksheet, which is one of the pages on here, that I think can be really useful and helpful, is thinking about, and I actually encourage you to write this stuff down because you have more thought about you now, hopefully if you're getting at least some sleep, that in the middle of the night at the 3 a.m. you'll have this information available to you. So who are your support people? Who is your wisdom circle? Who can you go to in the middle of the night? Who's emotional support for you? Who can run errands? Who maybe house cleaning is an important piece? Who can help set up pet care or play dates? I put meal captain on here because I think having a meal captain is really important, and we'll talk about that when we get to meal support. But really writing down who are those people, what are their roles, how do you get a hold of them? So if somebody else is in your house, you can sort of point to the worksheet maybe on your fridge. That you can kind of bring that support in, because we're not meant to parent alone. We're not meant to do this on our own. The one other piece that I'm going to say, I've been a birth doula, keep in mind, for a very long time. So I have seen and heard a lot of things. And my favorite metaphor used by my dear colleague, who gets to come in and be in our household. And if you have a pair of bloody underwear after your baby's born, there'll be some discharge. If you could hand that pair of bloody underwear to the person coming in, they're welcome to stay. They would not be considered a guest, and they're there to take care of you. So that's the barometer that I've seen some folks use of like, who's going to be staying with us? But people who are more in the guest category, that would be if you feel like you have to host them or they need to be taken care of, those are folks who maybe could come and visit for short periods of time, but really having some deep conversations with who feels supportive to you, who's going to support your relationship, who's going to support your confidence building and confidence boosting as a new parent. And really letting those people come in, and then how to set boundaries around the people that maybe aren't as supportive, or making requests of them so that they know how to be supportive. So those conversations can be very tender and tricky, and for other people, they're very easy, but having some of those conversations. And the next quadrant that I really love to talk about is, what are the potential breakdowns? So potential breakdowns, and, I gave space for 3 of them, and I will just walk you through the top one that I hear almost every single time is sleep. If we don't get sleep, our house starts to break down. So if your possible breakdown number 1 is sleep, coming up with a plan A, a plan B, and a plan C, and have them, of course, you'll have to be incredibly flexible when it comes up, but a plan A might be sleep when baby sleeps, and we're going to be fine, and it will all work out. But, sleep when baby sleeps, eat when baby eats, and do laundry when baby does laundry, if you've heard that joke before. Because baby doesn't do laundry, that means neither should the primary birthing parent as their body is recovering. So the plan B might be, how does one person get more rest? And I think a lot of times people in relationships are hesitant to move sleeping arrangements. Those of you who've had babies before, you're like, yep, we know this. We already do the, musical chairs, musical beds, right? Like it's nighttime and we fall asleep in some soft place that's not taken by another human. And, sometimes being able to move, if you have the option for different locations. So maybe person A sleeps with baby for the first half of the night and gets up and down with them, and person B sleeps somewhere else. And then maybe there's a certain time where you switch. So given, whatever that might look like, kind of changing things around, I want to give you options to think about, what are some tools? What if you really it's hard to fall asleep? Whoever said sleeps like a baby doesn't actually know. Most babies sleep with a lot of sound and movement. So it might be putting on earplugs, because you'll still be able to typically hear them crying if they're sleeping in like a sidecar or something. Or a baby monitor. Usually the recommendation is to have baby in the room. And so depending on where you're at with all of those individual and personal decisions, maybe it's a sound machine that just sort of cuts down any sort of interrupting noise. And sometimes white noise or pink noise or brown noise, I think, but if there are different levels, trying different kinds. So sometimes people try a fan and say that didn't work, but some people need like ocean waves that go up and down. So if baby's making movements, that it's not disrupting sleep. You might have a plan C. And what I will say is, if there's a lot of emotional struggle, if there's mental health breaking down, if people are like, there was a family we worked with where the dad was having a hard time driving to and from work, that was really creating a lot of distress for everybody in the house. Finding a 4-hour chunk, whether it's driving safety, whether it's mental health things, if it's early on in that, the research shows if you can try for your plan C to get 4 hours of sleep for 4 nights in a row. If you've never had a small child, 4 hours is going to sound like a terrible night's sleep. If you have had a small child, you're going to think that there's just no way to make that happen. But if there is some way to find where is that kiddo's biggest chunk of sleep and help your body to get ready to sleep during that big chunk. If the baby's eating every 2 hours, is there somebody else that can do feeding? What does that look like? And again, if we're on plan C, we're going to need to sort of dig in and make some sacrifices to get people back up to a good functioning level. So finding whatever that might look like. So for 4 hours, for 4 nights in a row. And then if you're not feeling a difference, right, then it might be, there might be another plan that's needed. Maybe I have one couple that had a plan D, which one person went to the hotel room, like sleep was so critical, we couldn't, we just need to stop everything. So maybe, if this helps you think about examples, and everybody's plan is going to be different, but filling that out. Other possible breakdowns or potential breakdowns that I've heard from families are food. So what's your plan A, B, and C with that? I really encourage meal trains with a meal captain. So having one person that's not you or your partner organizing people bringing food over. A lot of times, even outside of the time of COVID, I encourage people to put a cooler on their front porch with maybe a note that says, if you want to try and text us and see if we're available for 15 or 20 minutes. If we're not, please feel free to leave your food here. And thank you so much for visiting. A lot of folks, especially if they haven't had babies before, sometimes might not know, like you don't come over and stay or expect to eat a full meal together. You might peek in and see the baby or wave through the window, but really giving yourself that permission to receive food. And people love to receive food. I'll say my sweetheart just never quite understood why I was like always one of the first people to sign up for giving food. And I had a surgery. This was quite a while ago. And it was literally like almost tearing up. He said, I now understand why it was so important for people to bring food over. It's like this, it just feels like such a gift. So even if you don't quite get it or your friends don't quite get it, at some point they might. So people also love to bring food over. So asking for that support, just your focus should be on you and baby and bonding and connecting. So leaving things that can be outsourced, and it also helps build community. One family talked about it as this opportunity to receive not only the gift of food, but to try different kinds of foods than they normally would. So that's another way to think about working with that potential breakdown. Sometimes people will ask for at a baby shower a blessing way, bring over frozen meals, or maybe some of the blessing ways I've seen also includes making mass food to be frozen ahead of time to just warm up in the crock pot or an Instant Pot or throw in the oven. Other potential breakdowns, you might be thinking through some for yourselves. Some families, a clean house is really a cause for a potential breakdown. Communication, what does that look like? Again, that can go hand in hand with sleep deprivation. So another component, as we go down, what are things you're looking forward to together? So this list, I love to think about and to get really creative around what are the things you're looking forward to? And I remember this one was really specifically with my kiddo. I was changing like the millionth diaper. I could hardly tolerate it anymore. I was like, I can't do one more. And the thing that I couldn't wait to do was go camping with him. And there was a moment of like, okay, I'm going to do this diaper. It got me through diaper changes in the middle of the night. It works differently for other people, or maybe like, I can't wait to like put those tiny little socks on, or whatever the things are that you're looking forward to, write them down so that as you start to lose it, there's something to look forward to, and building some of those positive connections or associations. And the most important component, I wonder if I can, I can bring this in a little bit bigger. So I want to talk about couple care and self-care. If there's more than 2 people in your household, you can extend this out. But I want to talk about what is the self-care for me, what's the self-care for the other person, and what's the self-care for us. And so with each of these, I'm going to start with like, make a list. What are all the things I can do for my own self-care? And I'm not just talking bubble bath and candles. Like, self-care might be, if I can just get through the shower, that makes me feel a little better. Certain kinds of music is on my self-care list. Moving my body. Sometimes it's just in the form of stretching or dancing. For me, getting my hands in clay and creating things feels really good. So really take stock of that. Make a list. If you work with a therapist, help them or have them help you really brainstorm this to get it as long and thorough as possible, so you have a lot of things that are on there. And then break it down. If I had one day to myself, what would that self-care look like? That's unreasonable the first few months, weeks. And then what if I had 2 hours to myself? What could I fit into that time frame? If I had 5 minutes, right? So that we're breaking those into sizable chunks, because a baby might fall asleep and you don't know, do I have 5 minutes? Do I have an hour? So for me, for one example, I love to go paddleboarding and kayaking. And as a brand new mom, that wasn't going to be an option for me. So what about going out, taking a drive to the place that I like to paddle, and just sitting on the bench or putting my feet in the water? If I have 5 minutes, maybe it's looking through photos. Maybe I've created a photo album of all of my fun, adventurous times, or maybe it's mapping out new places that I want to explore with my kayak. So that's one example. Think about that with your partners. Find ways that, like, if your partner likes a 5-hour bike ride, great. What's a 15-minute version of that? Or yes, how about we get a doula support to be with me while you go out to do that? Because we also want to make sure our partners are taken care of, because having them come back into the household with refreshed energy is really important. I see partners sometimes say, oh, if my sweetheart can't go outside, I'm not going to. It's not helpful for anybody. So if it means lining up support so that you can do that, her girlfriend could come over and be with her while you do the thing that makes you feel your best. And then really, I think this us category, how do you reconnect? So if you're feeling disconnected, first of all, how do you know that? Does it start to come out in snippy fights? Does it start to come out in ignoring each other? So recognizing some of that, and then really focusing on what helps us to come back. If we had a whole day together, with some couples, I've heard one couple, they read a book together. If you're not able to read the Harry Potter series, maybe you get a book of quotes you can just read for 5 minutes. If you go out to this really nice dinner, but that's hard to do when you've got an infant, maybe you get takeout and you have somebody come over to just hold the baby while the two of you share a meal. For some folks, it's physical connection and that physical touch. Maybe it's massage. Maybe it's just words of affirmation. If you don't know the 5 love languages, I'm going to enter this in just briefly here. It's great for couples care. There's lots of things I don't totally love about the whole the whole concept, but we're not going to get into all of that. What I do love is that there's an efficiency and effectiveness with the love languages. So if my love language is words, you could give me service all day long. Service is a different kind of love language, or bring me gifts, and it's not going to fill my love tank. Coming in and having my sweetheart say, "Oh, Genevieve, you did such a great job parenting our kiddo today," or "I saw how hard that was." Like, giving me those words of affirmations will just fill my love tank really quickly. So if you know that about yourself, really giving your partner permission to use those love languages as well. So, and then using them for your partner. And then, are there things you do together? If it's like, we usually go out for a hike together and that really reconnects us, maybe again, it's looking at hiking pictures, or it's sitting on a bench near that, or it's sitting out, near a window. So breaking it down into sizable chunks. So I think I'm going to stop sharing the screen from there. Give yourself a moment to breathe. I just downloaded a lot of information. Maybe make some notes about what do you want to talk about together. Hopefully you've been taking some notes along the way. The next part that I want to talk about briefly here is really thinking about, what does your family need? And we've been talking about different components of this along the way, but I want to bring in Kimberly Ann Johnson's book, The Fourth Trimester. She also has the fourth trimester cards, but it's such a great book. What I really appreciate about her work is she traveled to a lot of different cultures, looking at what are their postpartum practices, and sort of tried to distill it down to what are the universal needs across cultures. And some places, some families are really strong and good at, some family structures or some cultures struggle with. But she came up with this list of 5 things that are needed across the cultures. One, and you'll have a link to some of her information, and there's a sweet video that she also created talking in more detail about each of these. One is extended rest. That is something that folks either struggle with or just can sink right into. So if you are in that perfection, high energy, I can't sit still category, this can be a challenge for some of us. So most cultures have at least 40 days, some 38, some 42, and there's a range, 45 I've also heard. But around 40 days of rest. And that's creating this cocoon kind of in your house. I've heard some midwives say 5 days in the bed, 5 days on the bed, 5 days around the bed. So that's the first 15 days. And then after that, really staying kind of close. When we can do this, our bleeding will be delayed. You could use guided naps. Sometimes people will use podcasts, but our body has to completely change to make space for the body or the baby. So then as the baby comes out, it takes a while for everything to kind of find its way again. It's a good time to limit news and media, setting good boundaries with social interactions so that you can use that sort of the beginning extended rest for cocooning. And that's also the time that your body is regulating the nervous system of your baby. So it's usually a time, and I'll say, I told my parents, if you come before the first 4 weeks, you're there to take care of me. If you come after 4 weeks, you can take care of your grandbaby. They were very excited, first grandbaby and all of that. But that for those first 40 days in particular really lets your nervous system entrain with your babies, so babies can sleep a little bit better. If you're planning on breast or chest feeding, that can go a little bit more smoothly because you start to sink into those rhythms together. When there's separation and somebody is taking care of the baby a bunch, that it doesn't help your hormones, nervous system, as well as doesn't regulate the babies as much. So that extended period of rest is good for your body's recovery and for the babies. What I will say, and I learned this personally as well as I knew it professionally, if you do too much, too soon, too fast, which is also the definition of trauma, but the too much, too soon, too fast, your body after birthing can start bleeding, and it's usually 24 hours after doing too much. So you might feel like, oh, I can do this, I feel great. And then the next day is when you might feel exhausted, or more heaviness in the pelvis or extended bleeding. So really going slowly. And so what I tell most people, think about what you're going to do and maybe cut that in half, because it's better to go slowly and build up than do a bunch and then have to try and cut back and catch up. You're going to cut way back more so than if you had just gone a little bit more slowly. One of my dear clients had said, okay, I think I got it. I have to go slow to go fast. And I love that phrase. So if we go as slowly as possible in those first 40 days, we're going to be able to recover, more quickly long-term. One thing I like to share that I've heard from one culture is that they believe whatever you do in the first 40 days will be what happens in the body after birthing 40 years from now. So you might not be peeing your pants 40 days after birth, but if in 40 years from now, I also don't want to be peeing my pants, I have to take really good care of my body to let the pelvic floor heal up instead of start to bulge down. And so meaning legs up, feet, or not legs up, but feet up, laying down, making sure you're not standing or sitting upright too much at the beginning. The second universal need is nourishing foods. Again, as the body's recovering and finding the descending bowels, coming down and finding their place, decreasing gassy foods, so that also can help decrease gassy foods for baby. So you're going to want really nourishing foods. So not a great time for cooking. So that's why that meal train can be really helpful, having people leave food at the porch. And really thinking about, warm, oily, moist foods. So, and even if it's summertime, not a lot of fresh, crisp greens, but kale and spinach might be a better choice than romaine lettuce, for example. And it's not the temperature of the food. I did have one person say, my husband heard what you said, and he's making me heat up my smoothies before I drink them. So not temperature hot, but just warming foods. So a lot of cultures will have porridges, or they'll have soups that are meant specifically to heal the body after giving birth. The third universal need, according to Kimberly, is the loving touch. And as she talks about, it might be starting with giving yourself an oil massage. Like, I'm going to just massage in the oils. So some of it's the touch, some of it's feeling that pleasure and connection again. It can be making those requests with your partner. It can be about the movement. That loving touches might be, those stretches could be internal, sort of movement touch, or it can be showers. I was able to have somebody in the height of the pandemic lead my husband through giving me a massage. So he got online support, because he didn't quite know how to offer a massage in a way that my body really needed. And it was so lovely. So there's lots of ways to offer that if you're not comfortable having more people come in. But you can also find ways to just slow things down, and touch and massage in particular can help to move out any of the toxic or toxins or stress hormones that can build up in the end of pregnancy and during birth, which are really helpful, but being able to move them out can kind of help with that resilience in the body. The next universal need is a wise community. And so really looking at who's on your list, who can you call, who helps you to feel safe, are there groups, who can you call regularly, or maybe having people check in. There's this lovely book called 7 Sisters, 7 Days, but they have 7 people, and the sister friend will call every Sunday, and this sister friend calls it every Monday. So having different folks checking in on you, it's only one day a week for them, but then you've got somebody checking in with you. People that you can say how you're really feeling with. There's a lot of parent groups. I run a parent group and co-facilitate it with other therapists. And it's a lovely group. Right now we're meeting we're meeting Tuesdays from 10 to 11:30. I'll make sure you have the link for that in your list of resources in the app. And they go for walks Thursdays or whenever the warmest day is, and we send an email out to anybody who's on the email list for that group. I know Mama Love also does some great village support, I think they call that. So really finding who those wise community members are, because there's sometimes difficult decisions or challenges, but who can be those non-judgmental support that comes in. Also, your WISE community can include pelvic floor physical therapist. A lot of times people will say, oh, I have pain with sex after having a baby and it's just normal, I guess. There's nothing normal about that. If you've been cleared after the 6 weeks from your midwife, really finding and seeking the help and support that your body needs, that there shouldn't be heaviness or pain with intercourse. So finding the support people that can really be there for you. And I know that the midwives won't give you this information or this recommendation, but I've heard other providers say, just keep having sex, it will get easier. And that's not the case. So finding who are the support people in our community that can help you to feel better in your body. Couples counseling, feeding support, lactation support, sleep support. So there's a WISE community. There's a lot of people available. And if you can't find them, keep asking until you can find somebody who can help you. You're not alone in this. We're not meant to do this alone. And then the last one is being in nature. And that the time in nature is so important for our nervous system. So finding if it's sitting in a park or a place to drive to, being in the sunshine, getting out. I'm not talking about hiking. I know in our bubble here in this area, sometimes there are people who are like, I can't wait to go for my next hike. Letting your body, have that extended rest, but also being out in nature, sitting on your back porch if you can or need to. So those are the 5 universal needs. I want to make sure that I know there are a lot more details, and one of the handouts about preparing for your postnatal time, there's a list of like, what are the resources we're going to need? Do I need to make sure I have pads or padsicles? And I know that Abri either is or will be going through that with you at one of her talks with you as well. But who offers mood support? Or what if my birth is traumatic? Or what if I had a traumatic experience before and it came out after the birth? So all of these things might come up. You don't have to know. I love to think about, there could be a huge book of all the things that could go kind of sideways. My experience is you're only going to need 1, maybe 2 pages out of that book. Some of us will have more of the pages than that, some maybe less. But who are the people who can help you figure out that 1 page when something goes sideways, how to support your relationship or how to support your own, if it's mood or trauma response. What I do want to make sure you know is that anxiety, mood, and disorders are the most common complication after having a baby. 1 in 5, 1 in 7, depending on where you get your statistics, will experience a postpartum mood or anxiety disorder. And that can look like depression, anxiety, trauma, OCD. It can look like postpartum rage, which people don't talk about enough, intrusive thoughts. And those are very separate from postpartum psychosis, which I think, unfortunately, the media talks about more. So I don't want to confuse those things. Those things I mentioned first are on a continuum. Postpartum psychosis is not on a continuum. It's a totally separate thing. It's 1 in every 2,000, I believe. Sometimes the numbers will go up some, depending on some of the risk factors, but it's incredibly rare. Most of the time, with adjustment to new life, that can come up. Some acute or long-term stress, grief, trauma will come up. So making sure that if you're doing all these other pieces, that you've got the right support and you're still having these struggles, to reach out. I know that the birth center will be offering sessions within your pregnancy and then postpartum to have an assessment of your mental health. And I highly recommend those as an opportunity to just pause, reflect, get a snapshot. How am I right now? Those challenges can be anywhere. I mean, I see people, maybe if they stop breastfeeding around 2, they might come into my office saying, I thought I was fine, but now I'm not feeling like myself again. So really giving yourself that space. We'll have a list of books as resources, but one of my favorite, 2 of my favorite books right now to recommend, one is called Good Moms Have Scary Thoughts. And the other is What About Us, about how to take care of your relationship after having a baby or many babies. And both of them are graphic novels. So you can just look at a picture and sort of get a sense from these cartoons of the inside story of what's going on. And a lot of us need support talking about what's going on inside. Some of us, it's natural. Some of us, it takes a while, but we don't talk about it as much as a culture. So we don't have that modeled in. And I want to give you permission to talk about anything that's coming up. And so finding support, whoever that might be, there are so many resources in the community. And what I hear from parents all the time is, I didn't know there was somebody I could talk to, or I felt really alone. And so breaking that down and just reiterating, if it's 1 in 5 parents who experience this and 1 in 10 non-birthing parents, 1 in 7, depending on those stats as well, you are going to know somebody. So maybe it doesn't impact or affect you, but you'll know somebody who's going to struggle, and that there are lots of supports and resources, that it doesn't have to be in silence, that reaching out sooner instead of just a lot of times like, well, today wasn't so bad, I'll wait till maybe tomorrow, I'll be fine too. Or I don't want to waste somebody's time because it's not that bad. All of those things are barriers that can keep us from feeling like our best selves, because all of our goal is to help you to feel your strongest and best so that you can bring that to your family. When you're healthy and well, your family can thrive. If you have any questions, please reach out. The Birth Center has my contact information. I found at the Joy Collective website as well, so you can always check there if you want to talk with anybody. There's a lot of resources there, and so I'm just going to throw out my contact information here at the joycollective.net. My phone number is on there. My email is on there. I'm not great at responding to email, which is just not personal, but feel free to reach out to myself or anybody at the Joy Collective. The Birth Center also has a ton of incredible resources for you, that you're not alone. Okay. Take good care. Be well.